as a marketer, I have a different take on it. I think that people rally around other people because of a shared set of values and personality types. And I think that it's okay to lean into that because it happens to like narrow your audience. And so I've done this throughout my life, right? I'm pretty secular from a religious community, so I was contrarian in that regard. I'm child free by choice, and so that often, that especially when I was dating, that limited the dating pool quite considerably. And now as an author, I have a particular style that may not suit everybody. I'm heavily satirical. I had an agent describe my work as like Lorelai Gilmore on Gilmore Girls, that I'm writing as fast as I talk. And so that sort of style and voice isn't going to be for everybody.
Hey, creative. Are you ready to discuss profits, the money, the ways to make it happen? The Profitable Creative Podcast is for you, the creative, how you define it. Videographers, photographers, entrepreneurs, marketing agencies, you get it. CEO of Core Group and author Christian Brim interviews industry experts, creative entrepreneurs, and professionals alike who strive to be creative and make money at the same time. Sound like you? Tune in now. It's time for profit.
Welcome to another edition of The Profitable Creative, the only place on the interwebs where you will learn how to turn your passion into profit. I am your host, Christian Brim. Joining me today is Alyssa Jarrett, author and consultant. Alyssa, welcome.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Christian.
I'm glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about your journey on becoming an author.
So I would say it was sort of an abrupt transition. I had been working in content marketing in the tech industry for over a decade, and I was recently in a executive level position as a VP of marketing for a very small startup. And I was the only marketer on the team. I basically was working 12-hour days, day after day. I was extremely burnt out, under immense pressure, and realizing that this just was not sustainable. My mental health was absolutely tanking. And after a refreshing Christmas break, right before 2022, I realized I just couldn't do this anymore. So come the new year, I after talking with my husband and with my therapists for months, said if I don't feel brave enough to do this now, I'm never going to do it. And so I decided to resign. And at that point, I had one novel written and was in like knee deep in the second. And I said I was just going to take a mental health sabbatical, really level set and focus on my health. And that turned into self-employment. And since then, I've been able to launch my debut, Love Actually, in May. And next week, I have my second novel, a rock climbing romance called Love on the Rocks, coming October 22nd.
Perfect. Now, so when you quit, you hadn't published your first book yet.
I hadn't, which I understand is pretty contrarian to the common advice not to quit your day job, because there's no guarantee that any of your creative pursuits are going to make money. But at that point, I wasn't really thinking of it as a business. I just said, like, for my health, I need to do this, and had negotiated with my partner that, for a year, I wasn't going to have to worry about making a certain level of income. And I'm in a very privileged position being from tech, and I had the ability to sell some stock options. So we had a pretty, good financial cushion. And I for that first month, I didn't do anything. I did puzzles. I watched Gossip Girl. I was a lump on a log for a while. But eventually I started to think, what could my future look like? And if I wanted to craft my career in a different way, what would that look like? And so I had an independent editor at that time, and we talked about it a lot. And she referenced Jamie Attenberg, who has a very popular newsletter. And Jamie at one point had said, if you already have a book written, and if you can work in a self-motivated manner, and you have plans and deadlines that you can set for yourself, and if it's not going to financially decimate you, sure, why not take that time and see if you can make something of yourself as an author, there's always the ability to go back to work. And so I haven't ever made a decision so drastic that I've completely ruined my life, but I'm happy to be here regardless.
That's only in stories, movies where, there's this one decision that defines the hero's life. That's fantasy. It is the culmination of the choices, in my experience. I mean, not to say that you couldn't make a drastic decision that would ruin everything, but I haven't seen it. I mean, so like you make a decision to kill somebody, right? Well, you didn't get to that point. I mean, there were lots of steps that got you to that point. So yes, maybe that one decision was drastic, but there were other decisions you made to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that's important to not catastrophize things in terms of potential outcomes. My business coach, when I'm struggling with something like that, he makes me engage my cognitive brain and say, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Like what is the absolute worst that can happen, and if you're okay with that, then you can proceed. But usually we don't go through that process, right? We just imagine things. We don't really think about them, if that makes sense.
Well, and as someone, with pretty severe anxiety at the time, I had used it often as a way of not moving forward. It
Mm-hmm.
was so easy to
Sure.
think of the worst case scenarios, and even with all of my, all of my privilege in my life, I kept thinking like there isn't any possible way I could do this. And eventually it got almost offensive. Like, if I can't do this under these like circumstances, absolutely no one can do this. And
Right.
so I at that point, I was just spinning myself into circles for no reason. And again, like you said, like this isn't life or death. We're not curing cancer here. Like, if I had to go back to work, I had to go back to work. But
Right.
at least I would have enjoyed the time off, and felt like I was charting a new path forward.
So looking back on the other side of it now, does that seem, I don't want to say silly. I don't want to trivialize what you were feeling, but like, does it seem strange that you could have been considering it, like that you were struggling with it?
Um, I mean, I think it's part of that creative perfectionism that everything has to go an absolutely perfect way all the time. Otherwise, you're a total failure. And I just told myself that integrity is one of the most important things to me. And if I was going to live out this experience, I wanted to do it in public. I wanted people to know. I can't necessarily resonate with authors who said, like, nobody knew I wrote a book until I published one. I'm like, I would rather bring people along that journey with me. And if I fail in public, then that's a learning lesson for everybody else. And so I actually had a lot of people reach out to me on LinkedIn when I posted about my resignation, saying that they were considering doing something similar or were inspired by my story. And I made a lot of really great writing friends that way.
So you self-published the book.
I did. Mhm.
How have you used your marketing skills to market your book?
Yeah, I think that's also something that I feel like a lot of folks who go into trad publishing are concerned about, saying that they either hate marketing or they're not good at it. And that was something that was very empowering to me. It's something I actually truly enjoy doing. And I think if you come into it with that mindset, you're going to have a much better time. And I would also preface saying that traditional publishing does not exempt you from marketing either. So, either way, you have to sort of have an entrepreneurial mindset. But it's been interesting applying a lot of the same fundamentals still exist, right? You still want to connect to people as if they're people. You still have to think about your target audience and not try to be everything for everybody. You have to be comfortable, like carving yourself a niche and owning a specific point of view. But it has also been a reckoning of saying that selling hundreds of thousands of dollars of enterprise software is drastically different than selling a $5 ebook to consumers. So I've been learning more about B2C marketing and just how people interact with book media on social, and just trying to figure out exactly what people are connecting with and why.
Yeah, I didn't coin this phrase, but somebody else said it. All sales is person to person, whether it's B2B or B2C. I mean, you're still dealing with the same fundamentals of engaging the individual.
Yep, absolutely. And, at this point, people want to connect with others in a parasocial relationship. And so I actually was really upfront with the fact that I'm not writing under a pen name. I have a background in journalism. And so, again, like showing up as my full authentic self is what I think is part of brand building. And so for me, I never wanted to hide behind an avatar. I was never that concerned as a marketer, especially of my privacy, because I am disillusioned of that fact online. And I understand that a lot of folks don't find the same values in that, especially in romance. I think there's a lot of fear and stigma. If and the more sexual your content, the worse this gets. Of people would ask me, what's your pen name, and I often took an affront to that, saying why specifically do me in this genre, why do I have to do this, whereas no one is asking someone who writes literary fiction, like, what's your pen name. And so I wanted to, again, like, represent the genre, defend it, support it, and make it as just as established and respectable as any other genre in the market today.
Interesting. I hadn't even considered that. When I published my book, I wanted my name associated with it. So the idea that someone wouldn't want their name associated with what they wrote is something I had never considered. Let's talk a little bit about personal brand. I struggled, and I still struggle with that, because I'm not one of those people that likes to draw attention to myself. Now, some people that know me well will say, "Oh, that's complete bullshit. You're always attracting attention to yourself." It's a difference to me of like being the funny guy or the entertaining guy versus putting myself out there as an expert. That's a different thing to me. But in any case, struggling with the idea of personal brand, I recently heard a speaker on the subject, and one of her things was that when she shows up in public, she always has the same color palette on. And I'm like, hadn't thought about that. And so then I went to an event last night, and I used to wear a cowboy hat all the time, and my Vans speakers and a T-shirt. And the one of my friends there goes, "Where's your cowboy hat?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't have it on." And I was telling my wife, she didn't go with me to this event, but I was telling her last night, I'm like, I figured out what my brand image is, and it's what I've already put out there. And I had done a speaking engagement a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't wear the shtick. And I'm like, I screwed up. Like, if that's the expectation that I've built out there, is that I look a certain way, that's how I need to show up. And that's a very foreign thing to me, because I don't think about what other people think of what I look like. That I'm like, I don't really care what you think what I look like. So talk to me about how you've developed your personal brand.
Yeah, and I would say that, some people really bristle at the idea that people can be brands. They find that very dystopian. As a marketer, I have a different take on it. I think that people rally around other people because of a shared set of values and personality types. And I think that it's okay to lean into that, because it happens to, like, narrow your audience. And so I've done this throughout my life, right? I'm pretty secular from a religious community, so I was contrarian in that regard. I'm child free by choice, and so that often, that especially when I was dating, that limited the dating pool quite considerably. And now as an author, I have a particular style that may not suit everybody. I'm heavily satirical. I had an agent describe my work as like Lorelai Gilmore on Gilmore Girls, that I'm writing as fast as I talk. And so that sort of style and voice isn't going to be for everybody. And I had to just lean into that fact and say, that's okay. right? Like the reason that people become diehard fans is because they connect with you immediately. And nowadays, when it's so easy to just DNF a book and start a new one, you want to have that like immediate connection with the reader. And I've had people reach out to me and say, "Oh, as soon as I started the page, I knew we were going to be best friends." So I realized, what is it about my brand, quote unquote, that resonates with certain kinds of people? And a lot of it is things that I don't really have a lot of control over, right? I have a career in tech. I'm a self-described coastal elite. And so I write a particular genre of rom-com that is not going to appeal to everybody. I also don't really shy away from being progressive politically. And so you sort of kind of come to the table knowing those things about me. And you're either along for the ride or not. And I'm grateful for every reader who gives me a chance and says, actually, this isn't my cup of tea. Because, I've realized as I've traveled, a lot of people drink tea differently. And you just have to find the people that are
Some people
connected.
put ice in it, which really makes some
I
people
do.
offended. Yes.
I love a good sweet tea. And I was in Scotland just a month ago, and I overheard in another American bamboozled that the British drink tea with milk in it. And that's how I've always, drank my hot tea. And even I put some milk in my iced tea. And that's when it hit me that, again, when I say you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, like a good chunk of people don't know how to drink tea properly.
Yeah, the British think that we're absolute heathens for drinking it iced. Like it's, they don't understand it. But it's a great illustration of that. Even something as universal globally as tea, it's not universal.
No,
Um,
no.
and
And people have very strong opinions on this.
Yes, 100%.
And so if they have strong opinions on the tea they drink, they are definitely going to care about what kind of books they read.
Today's episode of The Profitable Creative is brought to you by Core Group. Are you tired of doing it all yourself? Do you feel like you have no plan? Let Core Group guide you to build the business of your dreams. Core Group, your go-to accountant for creatives.
Yeah, and I think as we're talking about this, I mean, one of the things that I've struggled with in putting myself out there, personal branding, is the idea, like you, I want to be authentic. I don't want to pretend to be something that I'm not. But then the potential to offend. In today's environment where people are so easily offended, it's pretty much impossible to not offend somebody, right? Like, I mean, because people, I think, are looking to be offended. I don't know, and I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole of what's causing that, but I've struggled with like being authentic about some of my beliefs that I know are going to be divisive. Like if I talk about my being a disciple of Christ, for instance, that is going to immediately polarize people, right? And I don't want to polarize people unnecessarily, because I'm not out there as, for instance, a preacher. I'm not out there evangelizing. I want people to hear my core message of my book, and I don't want to distract them from getting that message. So
Yeah, I completely understand. And I think, again, coming from a marketing and PR background, I naturally think like a publicist of what kind of information is relevant at this point in time and how does it serve you and your audience. And so some people are very forthcoming about all sorts of topics, and that they're completely entitled to do that. But there are a lot of things that, frankly, I don't feel very educated or informed or even all that concerned about for that I need to talk about on a regular basis. And so for the things that are important to me, and I think that people will resonate with in my work, that's what I tend to focus on. And so I would say that it's going to range for everybody on how comfortable they like being sort of in public, especially online. And for me, I think being upfront about who I am also curbs some of that, where I think a lot of folks online are younger, right? The demographics skew younger. And for me, I remember at that age, I was a drastically different person. Everything was black and white. Everything was right or wrong. And I think as you age, you develop more nuance, and that you realize that there's a lot of gray. And so I'm always saying, hey, like, this is what's going on in my life. This is how I'm thinking about things. And if I feel like sharing, I will. And if people can choose to interact with that or not, at least they can't say like I've hidden something from them. I've been switched them. I'm a different person in my real life versus my virtual one. That's exhausting. So I feel like you just have to show up the way that feels most comfortable to you and find pockets of and niches of fandom and community online that's going to value that. And I think that's taken me time, especially publishing and being open to criticism. You have to get comfortable with the fact that you are somewhat of a public figure and people expect you to act accordingly. And that means like not throwing little tantrums on the internet and keeping your inside thoughts to yourself sometimes and complaining to a group chat rather than getting upset about, bad reviews online. And so I think of like put your publicist hat on, and if there was a PR person in your brain saying like, "Hey, is this a good idea?" You might want to think through some things before you just let everything loose.
Yeah, like I don't lead with "I hate cats," although I do. I hate cats. Right? Yeah. Like I I had a teacher in junior high school that would collect dead cats to articulate for like vet studies, right? So like he'd find these dead cats and then the conversation kind of morphed in like, I don't know if necessarily the cats were dead when he found them. And then I was like,
oh,
I'm totally fine with that. Like, if you kill cats, I'm totally fine with that. But I'm not leading with that because it's not necessary. And yet I've put it out there. I don't know. I'm not advocating. I'm not advocating killing cats. I want to be really clear. I'm not advocating killing cats. Do not kill cats. But don't bring them to my house either. Okay, let's pivot a minute. Where I've completely gone off the rails. Let's pivot.
That's the best conversation.
Let's pivot and discuss some of the challenges you've had as an author and a publisher. Where were the landmines you didn't know about?
Well, I would say that I did pursue traditional publishing at the outset. And so I queried 3 of the 4 manuscripts that I wrote in the series that I'm currently publishing. And I've said before that, a lot of the times traditional publishing serves as a type of external validation. And I saw them as the people pleaser that I am. These are authority figures, and I am meant to do their bidding. I'm a great rule follower. You give me a rule, and I'm down. And so I want to make them proud. I want to make them happy. And it was really about like feeling like the world deemed me worthy. And after a few years of that, I had built some good relationships with some literary agents. And one in particular, we had worked on a revise and resubmit of my debut. And so last year I spent 6 months, I would say at least half of that book was kind of torn down to the studs and started over. And so that took a lot of time and energy out of me. But I was very grateful for that experience because I truly believe that the book is better because of it. And yet I still received a soul crushing, "This is so great, but I'm going to have to pass a second time." And again, she said it had nothing to do with the craft. It was about the voice being not a long-term fit for her list. And at that point, after having a little pity party for a day, I realized that was actually a really sweet rejection because that was so subjective. And I realized that my craft was of publishable quality. And if the sales, eventually come, those agents will definitely come back around. I know how the industry works now. And so I felt very comfortable at that point pursuing indie publishing, because I was validated, internally, that I felt proud of the work that I had done, and I felt that I was ready to bring this to market. And at that point, I was super excited. I just really wanted to get these stories out, to readers. And it's been so fun to really overcome that and feel very comfortable with my decision and say, there's again, it's not like life and death, like W-2 versus 1099. Like, these are all interchangeable, and so is trad and indie. I'm sure at some point I'll be a hybrid author, but these agents and editors, they're just business partners, right? They're here to help you find distribution and reach. And they ultimately want sales, right? This is a business. And so I feel like the only thing that is considered a true failure is if you give up entirely. I'm happy the way that things have gone, and I think it's made me more resilient, and more confident in my decisions moving forward.
You said something very profound. I don't know if you realized it, but I think actually two things, but they're kind of related. So the first is that it is a business. Whatever you're trying to sell, someone has to be able to sell it and make money, yourself or your partners. But that can feel not right to a creative when you're taking something from yourself and creating it, and part of you is in it. And that kind of leads to the second point about the validation. That is my work good enough? Is what I have, and I think at the end of the day, I have an episode with my daughter, who is a figurative painter, and we kind of delved into this discussion around creativity and profitability. And if you do your work and it comes from you, you don't need any validation, because it is what it is. And if you're not satisfied with it, it needs to be because you're not satisfied with the work you've done, not what other people have said, right? But if you're going to sell it and make a profit, it does have to have acceptance from others, and that's a hard line to weave sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you'll always face that balancing act, because if you end up, even if you get past agents and editors and you get that shiny book deal from a big five, right? Then you're facing readers, and every author cannot escape facing readers. And readers at the end of the day are people, and they're subjective. And, you have to be comfortable with anything that really comes your way. And no matter whether they praise you or they denigrate you, like, you have to be able to say, well, I really loved that book I wrote. Like, I'm really proud of the work that I did. It was, the best work that I could do at the time. And every book, you get better and better. And eventually the goal is to gain traction. No one expects profitability from day one, but you need to be making momentum in the right direction. And that's all I've really wanted to do. So I treated it like a business from the start. I established an LLC. I considered, what my expenses were going to be. I laid out a budget. And even though, like, those books are not profitable yet, I know that this is the first year of my small business. And that is a journey that I am going to be taking. And so, again, I work in tech, and the vast majority of these startups aren't profitable. But that doesn't mean that they aren't going to achieve a success in some form in the future. And it's important to gain market share regardless of profitability. And so those sorts of things about risk taking, I think I've definitely taken from the tech and venture capital world. Of, you have to invest in yourself if you want to see, the fruits of your labor.
Hey, listeners, are you ready to turn your passion into profit? then grab a copy of Profit First for Creatives. Click the link in the show notes to purchase a copy. And if you're not ready to make that full commitment, you can download a free copy of the first chapter. Check it out right now. Yeah, I mean, you are right. It's much easier when you can do an activity and see the result immediately, right? One of the things that I struggled with was in writing the book, and in writing the book, I had an expectation of like what I was going to sell, but I didn't really know. At the end of the day, it's not going to be profitable, the book itself, for some time, but I had a vision for what I wanted it to do. And, you know, it's hard when the rewards are deferred, for sure. But I think the important thing, like you said, is the intent is there. You see the pathway, and it may not go straight, probably won't go straight, but it's with an intent to have a profit, and you may make mistakes and some things not work out. But to me, it's important about having that profit intent, that you're not just throwing something up against the wall and seeing if it sticks.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then it's also important to be honest about the fact that things cost money. And when you're a self-published author, you have to upfront these costs yourself. And so, yes, it's not necessarily fair that I have to pay for my own editing and I have to pay for my own cover art and I have to do these things that traditional published authors don't get to do. But I am also in full control of my business. And I appreciate that and I respect that. And I treat books as a source of income. It doesn't have to be the sole source of income. I think author entrepreneurs these days are balancing books with premium subscriptions on Substack, with courses, with YouTube advertising and other social advertising, with merchandise, with touring. I mean, think about all of your other creative professionals that you respect and how they make money, right? Actors, musicians, right? Like they have sponsorships, they have deals in a variety of areas. And so books are no different. They're a relatively, low price point and you'd have to sell a lot in order to really make an impact. And so what other things can you build in your repertoire as a business owner? And I'm excited by that. Like again, as a marketer, I know that a lot of people are like, oh my God, I don't want to do all that work. And I'm saying, okay, but like, then you have to accept that your business is going to be different. And if you don't think of it as a business, that's probably the first, notch against you. I'm invigorated by the idea of creating a creative life for myself. And unfortunately, there's been no time in history where you just get to be a hermit in a cave and write and the accolades just come rolling in.
No. Well, and I think you hit it on the head, and this is something that I preach is you are an entrepreneur with certain skills. So in your case, writing, marketing, whatever, but you're an entrepreneur first, because when you lead with your skills, like, well, okay, I can do marketing and I can do writing, you limit yourself and you limit what your opportunities are. As we were thinking, I'm like, oh, how about if you did and you're going to laugh at me. What if you had weekend getaways that were programmed around your stories?
I mean, you have to be creative, right?
Right?
You have to think differently.
Sell the experience.
I've gone to tech conferences because I know that that's also where my target reader is. I'm doing a signing at a climbing gym next week because my romance is about rock climbing. So it's like you have to get out of your like writer bubble and think, okay, what is the larger audience you're trying to sell to? And can you get them interested in your book just because they're interested in the thing that your book is about?
Are you a rock climber?
I would say recreationally. So it was something that my husband got me into as we were dating, and I realized that the Venn diagram of people who work in tech and people who rock climb, there's a big overlap in that circle. And it's gotten a lot of flack for, especially in cities that are gentrified like Oakland, where I live. And so this is something that I wanted to tackle from like a comedic, satirical lens of, all of these Bay Area folks. We're not particularly outdoorsy, and so what happens when someone like myself goes to Yosemite to learn how to trad climb and is fundamentally not good at these sorts of things, and hijinks ensue. It's super fun. It's got a lot of sexual tension, and I think it's a hoot.
Yeah, I ruled out rock climbing. I'm way too large, so that's just
Hey,
not going to work.
it's for every body type, I'll say. And the one thing I love about rock climbing is that it's a mental puzzle at the end of the day. Like, it's a full body workout, but like, I'm trying to figure out how to put my feet and my hands in places to get to the top. And that to me is more of a mental exercise than anything else.
I've also given up on surfing. I don't think or a
Well,
gymnast.
now, no shark is coming at you in the rock climbing gym to eat you. So I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. What else? You mentioned the landmine of, the upfront costs, and what other things did you not know before you went on this journey that you found?
Oh my goodness. There's so many things that you just need to experience for yourself. There's just a lot of logistical issues about publishing, especially if you're going to be your own publisher. And all those little nitty gritty details take a lot of mental toll on me. When I went into it, I thought I would be able to juggle publishing a book and marketing it, and then also writing the next one, or at least in this case, editing the next one because I have all four drafted. And I needed to accept the fact that like my mental energy on launching this book is valid and it is vital, and I deserve to give it my whole attention. And so when I go into marketing mode, like I give it my all. And it's not until after this book is going to be launched next week am I starting to think about, okay, let me go back into my next draft and think about getting that to completion. I'm not a particularly great multitasker, and I don't think most people are. And so I would say, like, what is it that the Nick Offerman quote? Like, don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. And when you're in marketing, like in marketing mode, like give it your full attention. I would say because of that, I'm really glad I had the foresight to draft multiple books at once before I decided to publish them. So readers especially do not like to give they don't like to give a lot of flexibility to authors that are unproven and unknown. So if you start writing a series and you do not finish one, there are going to be many readers who will never read it because they're waiting for it to be done. They're also trying to see if they can trust you to finish a project, and so they're waiting to see if you can handle this. And so I would recommend getting several books underneath you before taking this journey, because you want to give yourself enough of a head start. Like, publishing is hard, and you want to give yourself every advantage possible.
Yeah, and you're really talking about really two distinct skill sets there. Writing versus marketing. I mean, those are, some people might say are similar, but like to me, that'd be two different things. And yeah, it would be easy to do both of them poorly if you didn't focus on one of them, for sure. Well, how do we find your book? What give us the titles.
Yeah, so my debut is called Love Actually. It is a Silicon Valley rom-com based, or I should say inspired by a corporate scandal that I was managing when I worked in tech. And so it's got a lot of juicy nuggets in there for anyone who knows me. And my second book is called Love on the Rocks. And it's a rock climbing romance inspired by documentaries like Free Solo. So if you're fascinated by the world of climbing, even if you're not particularly athletic like myself, it's a whole lot of fun. And so I focus on just breezy, bingeable romantic comedies that are hopefully going to just be uplifting and escapist and a whole lot of fun.
Where do we buy them?
That's a good question. Should have probably gotten there. My ebooks are exclusive to Kindle Unlimited, so they're available on Amazon. Paperbacks are available wherever books are sold, and you can get signed copies from me on my Etsy. But to just find out about my work in general, you can go to alyssajarrett.com, or you can follow me on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at author Alyssa Jarrett. And I'm also on Substack for my newsletter. It's called Grumpy Plus Sunshine at alyssajarrett.substack.com.
Yeah. So has anybody approached you about movie rights yet?
Not yet, but I'm always open. My inbox is there.
maybe that's your next thing is you write a screenplay.
I have been told, because I feel like my books are pretty cinematic and dialogue heavy, that I might be conducive to screenwriting. I would love to get into any medium, so I'm very flexible about anything that I do in the future.
Yeah, I have not dabbled. I've learned a little bit about that side, and it's fascinating how cheaply you can make a movie now. And so, you may have to produce it yourself, but who knows?
Well, I would be in good company. A lot of my friends are also indie filmmakers, and that's just something that I'm not one to say no when it comes to getting stories told. And so that just sounds like a whole lot of fun to me.
Well, I'm eager to, although I will admittedly say that genre is not one that I read. I am looking forward to reading and your books and escaping, and maybe I'll pass them on to my wife. Maybe she would be more your target market, but we'll see. But I look forward to it.
I appreciate coming on here and just talking about books and creativity and making this whole business life happen. I could talk about this literally all day.
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your experience share. Listeners, if you like what you hear, share the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast. If you don't like what you hear, shoot us a message and tell us what you want to hear. Until then, ta-ta for now.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Profitable Creative. Until next time, you money lovers. And don't forget, Profit First for Creatives is live via Amazon. Link below.